Those who have higher rates of heart disease, much higher rates of blindness as they age. Their kidneys fail. That requires various other forms of intervention. And this is not just a Canadian phenomenon. If you look around the globe, as societies become less active and more overweight and obese, so the proportion of diabetes will increase. And this slide just disguises some cause for celebration with some cause for gloom. What you see here are the typical risk factors of heart disease, smoking the most important, hypertension or high blood pressure, high levels of cholesterol, all having decreased over the course of the last 2 or 3 decades. And that's a very good news story. Despite some of the other comments that I made, we've done a very good job at reducing the burden of cardiovascular disease. 2/3 of the reduction in cardiovascular disease mortality has come about not because of programs of treatment, but because of programs of prevention. That's an important point to consider. But what we also see here is that, as you might expect, the rates of being overweight and obese have increased dramatically, and this only goes as far as 1990, and that trend continues. And so has the rate of what we call end-stage renal disease, or kidney failure. And kidney failure is treated by offering individuals dialysis on a weekly, or sometimes more often kind of basis. And nobody is talking about how we are possibly going to be able to meet the dialysis needs of our population in the years ahead. And P.S., the undercurrent to that is that by the year 2030, which is not that far away, if you want a health system, as it is currently structured and organized, you're going to have to do without public schools, high schools, universities, roads and highways, because there won't be enough money in the provincial budget to pay for it, or them. And so these kinds of demands which will be imposed upon our health system have an added significance because they threaten the very viability of our ability to provide any form of a health system to our population. Now, that argues obviously for substantial structural changes, reforms, et cetera, in what we do, and one hopes that the kind of consideration that's necessary for that will be forthcoming. So what have been, though, the contributing factors to the fact that youngsters today no longer seem to be physically active, we've seen that data, and seem to be increasingly obese? And I'm a very simplistic guy, so the only figure of speech I know is alliteration, so all these words have to start with the same letter. And I think these are attributable to 5 fundamental factors, for which these might be metaphors, but nonetheless permit me or indulge me. Security. I want you to come home. You come home from school, you get in that house, you close that door. Don't let anybody in. Don't go out of the house until I come home. It's not safe to be together. So children today come home, they close one door and another opens. It's called the refrigerator. And so not only are children no longer physically active, falling out of trees and wrecking their neighbors' gardens, they're sitting at home, usually in front of a screen of some kind, opening a refrigerator door, and rather than burning calories, increasing caloric intake. Very, very substantial. Solicitude, parental solicitude. Oh, I don't want you to get hurt. Get out of that tree now. Something nasty is going to happen to you. There has been a misguided, misappropriated, misdirected concern on the part of parents towards the safety of their children. Yeah, you know what? Some kids are going to fall out of trees. And some kids are going to dislocate their shoulder and maybe fracture a foot. I don't mean to trivialize that. But the degree to which we have tried to erect a cocoon of safety and security around children is unrealistic, and it is not reflective of the reality of the risks represented to children by tearing around on a bicycle. It's far more hazardous to have your kid at home sitting immobile, drinking soft drinks, eating cheesies, and watching some form of a screen than it is to have that individual batting balls around the neighborhood. So security solicitudes, screens, and sodas. And I use sodas here as a metaphor for the fast food generation, although as you will see, there is a very significant relationship between soda, soft drink consumption, and the incidence of childhood obesity. And as a digression, soda consumption also contributes substantially to osteoporosis. And soda consumption also generally, and fast food ingestion in general, tends to make children thirstier, so they drink more soda, or they have such a higher intake of sodium as a consequence of their fast food intake that contributes to blood pressure, and that's another story for another time, another place. And finally, school buses. Again, metaphorical. We don't let kids walk anywhere anymore. And we have these very expensive policies of busing kids from here to there and from there to here. And I would argue that we need to look very carefully about the nature of some of those policies. And look, I'm a guy that rode a school bus every single day of my high school life. And I understand that I was not going to be able to walk the 16 miles every day to and from high school. So I'm not naive in this reality. But in this city, we have hordes of warehouses which are colored yellow, have tires at every corner, ferrying children around the city for reasons that are not necessarily always clear to me. The minimum requirement to bus a child, it seems to me, needs to be re-examined for a variety of reasons. So, all right, so obesity is a problem. How are we going to address that? Well, the assumption is made, this is just a question of energy in, energy out. I'm a little teapot short and stout. If you want to be less obese, you eat less and exercise. It's not that simple. In fact, it's hellaciously more complex than that. And if you just look at this, one of the least complicated diagrams of the factors that contribute to obesity, all of a sudden you see that there are a whole array of international, national, regional factors, subsidies, tariffs, food distribution networks, costs of transportation, all of which make it less likely that a mother in a moose factory is going to buy fruits and vegetables for her sons and daughters. If Pepsi is cheaper than fruits and vegetables in the moose factory, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what is going to be bought. It's understandable. So we need to think about disentangling this complex web, of the factors that contribute to obesity and the easy availability of high-calorie, cheap food. Back in the early part of the 20th century, American grain farmers argued to the U.S. government that they should do something to subsidize their grain surplus. And so the U.S. government subsidized the transformation of this grain surplus into corn liquor. And so corn alcohol became one of the cheapest commodities in that community, that society. And I don't need to tell you the problems that were spawned, predictably, as a consequence of the fact that you had enormous quantities of alcohol at astonishingly low prices. And the resulting social disruption was what fueled the appetite for prohibition. Nowadays, American farmers have a corn grain surplus. They have argued and received for subsidies to convert that grain surplus into something we call high-calorie fructose corn syrup. So the high-calorie fructose corn syrup is the cheapest ingredient a food manufacturer can put into their food products. And somebody has suggested, and I don't know the accuracy of this, that there's more high-calorie fructose corn syrup in a chicken McNugget than there is chicken. And it's made possible the whole super-size me phenomenon. So that fast food restaurants can sell you enormous quantities of soft drinks in particular, and make enormous profits as a consequence of the fact that the ingredients of those fast food beverages and foods are so cheap. And so now you begin to see that there are very substantial political implications to our being able to address some of the factors that form the basis of our discussion. And there is evidence, and I'm sorry for the fact that the reference isn't on this slide. Our pediatric colleagues have calculated that each additional daily serving of a soft drink increases the risk of childhood obesity by 60%. And that's a startling factor. It's a very